The morning sun cast long shadows through the grand windows of Kensington Palace as Thomas, the head guard, made his routine security check through the royal quarters. His footsteps echoed softly on the marble floors as he moved through corridors lined with centuries of royal portraits. The palace was unusually quiet this Tuesday morning, with most of the staff attending to their duties in the lower wings. As Thomas approached the memorial wing where the late Princess Elena's personal chambers had been preserved exactly as she left them, he noticed something unusual. The heavy oak door, which was always kept locked except for the monthly cleanings supervised by Prince William himself, stood slightly ajar. A sliver of morning light escaped from within, casting an unusual glow in the dimly lit hallway. Thomas paused, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. Protocol dictated that no one entered these sacred rooms without the prince's explicit permission and presence. The chambers had remained untouched for nearly 2 years since Princess Elena's tragic death, serving as a private sanctuary where Prince William would sometimes retreat to find solace among her belongings. Pushing the door open carefully, Thomas stepped inside and froze. Lady Catherine, the prince's stepmother who had married his father King Charles 5 years after Elena's death, knelt beside the ornate four-poster bed. Her hands worked quickly, methodically stripping away the silk bedding that had been Elena's favorite, the soft lavender sheets embroidered with tiny forget-me-nots that she had chosen during happier times. Lady Catherine's usually composed demeanor showed signs of haste. Her perfectly styled auburn hair had come loose from its pins, and her designer dress was wrinkled from her efforts. Beside her on the Persian rug lay a carefully folded set of new bedding crisp white linens with the royal coat of arms, formal and cold in their perfection. "Your ladyship," Thomas called out, his voice steady despite his shock. "I need to inform you that these chambers are restricted." Catherine spun around, her green eyes flashing with a mixture of surprise and defiance. For a moment, neither spoke. The air in the room felt heavy with the weight of tradition and memory. Elena's presence seemed to linger in every corner. From the family photographs on the nightstand to the half-read novel still bookmarked on the window seat. "I am simply updating the linens," Catherine replied, lifting her chin with practiced authority. "These old things are gathering dust and moths. It's time for a proper refresh." Thomas remained firm, though his voice carried deep respect. "Ma'am, Prince William has given strict instructions that nothing in these rooms is to be altered without his direct supervision. I must ask you to step away from the bed." The tension in the room was palpable. Catherine's jaw tightened as she realized her plan had been discovered. She had chosen this particular morning knowing that William was attending a charity event in London, expecting several hours of privacy to complete what she saw as a necessary change. "These rooms cannot remain a shrine forever," she said, her voice rising slightly. "The palace must move forward. Elena is gone, and holding onto every thread and trinket serves no one." Thomas stepped closer, his duty clear despite the delicate nature of confronting a member of the royal family. "Your ladyship, I understand your perspective, but I have my orders. Prince William considers these chambers sacred ground." Catherine's hands clenched the new linens tighter. In her mind, she was trying to help her stepson heal by removing what she saw as painful reminders. But Thomas recognized the deeper implications of her actions. This wasn't just about betting. It was about control, about the ongoing struggle between the past and present within the royal household. "I will need to contact Prince William immediately," Thomas continued, reaching for his radio. "Wait!" Catherine said sharply, standing up from beside the bed. "There's no need to disturb him during his official duties. I can explain this matter to him myself when he returns." But Thomas had already made his decision. His loyalty was first and foremost to Prince William, and he knew that discovering this breach of trust secondhand would be far worse than learning about it immediately. The radio crackled to life as he pressed the call button. "Control to Unit 7. Priority message for Prince William. Personal matter requiring immediate attention at Kensington Palace." Catherine watched in growing alarm as Thomas made the call. She understood now that her carefully planned morning had turned into something much more serious. What she had intended as a quiet, helpful gesture was about to become a family crisis. The response came quickly through Thomas's earpiece. Prince William was leaving his charity event immediately and would return to the palace within the hour. The gravity in the prince's voice, even filtered through radio static, was unmistakable. As they waited, Catherine attempted to restore the original bedding, but Thomas gently prevented her from touching anything further. "It's best if everything remains exactly as Prince William will find it," he explained diplomatically. The next 45 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. Catherine sat rigidly in Elena's favorite reading chair while Thomas stood guard near the door. Neither attempted conversation, but both understood that this moment would have lasting consequences for the entire royal household. The sound of rapid footsteps in the corridor announced Prince William's arrival before he appeared in the doorway. His usually composed expression showed a mixture of hurt, anger, and disbelief as he took in the scene before him. The partially stripped bed, the formal white linens on the floor, and Catherine's defensive posture told him everything he needed to know about what had transpired in his absence. Prince William stood in the doorway of Elena's chambers, his face pale with controlled rage. The sight of the partially stripped bed felt like a physical blow to his chest. These rooms had been his sanctuary, the one place where he could still feel connected to his beloved wife, who had died so suddenly in that terrible car accident 2 years ago. "Leave us, Thomas," William said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of barely contained emotion. "Thank you for calling me immediately." Thomas nodded respectfully and departed, closing the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo through the suddenly oppressive silence. William stepped further into the room, his eyes taking in every detail of what Catherine had attempted to do. "How dare you?" he whispered, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. "How could you possibly think you had the right?" Catherine rose from the reading chair, smoothing down her wrinkled dress in an attempt to regain some dignity. "William, I know this looks bad, but I was only trying to help." "You spend too much time in here surrounded by painful memories. Elena wouldn't want you living like this." The mention of his wife's name in this context sent a surge of fury through William's chest. "You have no idea what Elena would want. You barely knew her. You were too busy trying to position yourself as the next queen consort while she was still alive." The accusation hung in the air between them like a blade. Catherine's face flushed red, but she held her ground. "That's not fair, and you know it. I waited a respectful period after Elena's death before your father and I announced our relationship." "Respectful?" William's voice rose for the first time. "You were circling like a vulture before Elena was even buried. Father might be blind to your manipulation, but I see you clearly." Catherine's composure finally cracked. "Your father loves me, William. I make him happy in ways that Elena never could have. She was too consumed with her charity work and her causes to give him the attention he needed." The words were like gasoline on fire. William stepped closer, his eyes blazing with a fury that made Catherine instinctively step backward. "Elena was a better woman than you could ever hope to be. She dedicated her life to helping others while you spent yours scheming for a crown." "She's dead, William!" Catherine shouted, her own anger finally erupting. "Elena is gone, and no amount of preserving her rooms or keeping her memory alive will bring her back. You're destroying yourself with this obsession, and you're taking the entire royal family down with you." William moved toward the bed, running his hand gently over the lavender silk sheets that Elena had loved so much. The fabric still held the faintest trace of her perfume, a delicate floral scent that could transport him back to happier mornings when she would read to him from the morning papers while they shared coffee in this very bed. "These sheets," he said softly, his anger temporarily replaced by grief. "She chose them during our honeymoon in the French countryside. She said the color reminded her of the lavender fields we walked through on our second day there. Every morning for 3 years, she would make this bed herself, even though we have staff for that. She said it was her way of starting each day, with intention and gratitude." Catherine watched him, seeing perhaps for the first time the depth of his connection to these seemingly simple objects. But her own frustration remained strong. "William, I understand that these things hold meaning for you, but maintaining this room like a museum isn't healthy. Even the palace staff whisper about it. They're concerned about your mental state." "The palace staff." William turned to face her, his grief hardening back into anger. "Work for me, not for you. Their concerns are not your responsibility, and these chambers are absolutely none of your business." Catherine straightened, drawing on years of social training to project authority. "I am your stepmother and your father's queen consort. Everything that affects this family is my business. Your behavior reflects on all of us, and your refusal to move forward is becoming a public embarrassment. Public embarrassment? William's voice became dangerously quiet. The only embarrassment in this family is my father's hasty remarriage to a woman who was clearly waiting in the wings for her opportunity. The cruelty of his words made Catherine flinch, but she recovered quickly. Your father was lonely and grieving. I helped him heal and find happiness again. That's what people do. They move on from tragedy and build new lives. It's what Elena would want for him, and it's what she would want for you. Don't you dare tell me what my wife would want, William said through gritted teeth. Elena loved my father like her own parent. She would be horrified to know how quickly he replaced my mother's memory with you, and she would be disgusted by your attempt to erase her presence from these rooms. Catherine's patience finally snapped completely. I am trying to help this family heal. Your mother died 20 years ago, William. Your father has every right to find love again, and now Elena is gone too, but you're so determined to live in the past that you can't see how your grief is poisoning everything around you. My grief, William repeated slowly, is not something that needs your management or your timeline. Elena was my wife, the mother I hoped our children would have known. Her memory is not an obstacle to be overcome. It's a treasure to be preserved. Catherine moved closer to him, her voice becoming more urgent. But at what cost, William? You're 35 years old. You should be thinking about remarriage, about producing heirs to secure the line of succession. Instead, you're locked in this room with dead woman's belongings, refusing to engage with living possibilities. The calculated nature of her words, reducing his beloved Elena to an obstacle to royal succession, ignited something primal in William's chest. Get out, he said quietly, his voice filled with more menace than any shout could convey. William, please listen to reason. Get out, he roared, his voice echoing off the chamber walls with such force that Catherine stumbled backward in shock. Get out of this room, get out of Elena's chambers, and stay out of my sight. Catherine's face went white with a mixture of fear and indignation. She had never seen William lose control so completely, and the raw fury in his eyes made her realize that she had crossed a line from which there might be no return. Catherine fled Elena's chambers with as much dignity as she could manage, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors as she hurried toward her own wing of the palace. Behind her, she could hear William's ragged breathing and the sound of him carefully, tenderly, restoring Elena's bedding to its proper place. The gentle way he handled the lavender silk sheet stood in stark contrast to the fury he had just displayed. News of the confrontation spread through the palace staff with the swift efficiency of a well-oiled rumor mill. Servants who had witnessed Catherine's hasty exit and William's thunderous shouts exchanged knowing glances as they went about their duties. Thomas, bound by duty to report the incident formally, prepared a detailed account for the palace security files, knowing it would eventually reach King Charles. In her private sitting room, Catherine paced frantically, her mind racing through the implications of what had just occurred. She had underestimated the depth of William's attachment to Elena's memory, and more importantly, she had misread her own position within the royal hierarchy. Despite her marriage to the king, she was still the outsider, still the woman who had arrived after tragedy had already shaped the family dynamics. Her lady's maid, Margaret, entered quietly with afternoon tea, taking careful note of her mistress's agitated state. Margaret had served the royal household for over 20 years and had witnessed the rise and fall of many court favorites. She recognized the signs of someone whose influence was suddenly in jeopardy. "Shall I cancel your appointments for this afternoon, Your Majesty?" Margaret asked carefully, using Catherine's formal title as a subtle reminder of her status. "Yes," Catherine replied curtly, still pacing, "and send word to His Majesty that I need to speak with him urgently when he returns from Parliament." Margaret nodded and withdrew, leaving Catherine alone with her racing thoughts. She understood now that her attempt to help William move forward had been perceived as something far more sinister, an attack on his most sacred memories, and a power play to establish her authority over spaces that predated her arrival in the family. Meanwhile, in Elena's chambers, William sat heavily in his wife's favorite reading chair, the same chair where Catherine had waited earlier that morning. The room felt different now, violated in some fundamental way. The sanctity he had so carefully maintained had been breached, and even though he had restored everything to its proper place, something essential had been damaged. He picked up the novel Elena had been reading before her death, still bookmarked at page 127. It was a romantic comedy about second chances and new beginnings, the kind of light fiction she enjoyed after long days of serious charitable work. The irony wasn't lost on him. Elena would have found it amusing that her stepmother-in-law was now lecturing him about second chances while trying to strip away the very reminders that kept Elena's memory alive. Thomas appeared in the doorway, knocking gently on the open door. "Your Highness, I wanted to apologize if my actions caused additional distress. I felt I had no choice but to contact you immediately." William looked up from the book, his anger toward Thomas completely absent. "You did exactly what you should have done, Thomas. Thank you for protecting this room, and for being honest with me about what you witnessed. Is there anything else you need from me regarding this incident?" William considered the question carefully. He knew that formal reports would be filed, and that his father would eventually learn about the confrontation. "Prepare a written account of everything you saw this morning. Make sure it's thorough and accurate. I suspect we'll need it." As Thomas departed, William's phone buzzed with a text message from his private secretary. "HM the King requests your presence in his study at 6 p.m. today. Urgent matter to discuss." William closed his eyes, knowing that Catherine had already begun her counteroffensive. She would frame the morning's events as concern for his well-being, perhaps even suggesting that his attachment to Elena's memory had become unhealthy or obsessive. She would position herself as the caring stepmother trying to help him heal, while painting him as the unstable heir clinging to the past. But William also knew something that Catherine didn't fully understand: his father's own complicated relationship with memory and loss. King Charles had struggled for years with the balance between honoring his first wife's memory and building a new life with Catherine. The king understood the pull of preserved spaces and cherished objects, even if he had ultimately chosen a different path forward. At precisely 6 p.m., William knocked on his father's study door. King Charles, now in his 70s but still commanding in presence, gestured for his son to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. The study was a monument to royal history, with portraits of monarchs dating back centuries and shelves lined with leather-bound volumes of state papers and family histories. "Catherine has told me about this morning's incident," the king began without preamble. "She's quite upset, and frankly, so am I." William met his father's gaze steadily. "I imagine she would be upset, considering she was caught violating the explicit instructions regarding Elena's chambers." "William," the king's voice carried a warning tone, "Catherine is my wife and your stepmother. She deserves your respect regardless of any disagreements you might have with her actions. Father, she entered Elena's chambers without permission and attempted to strip away Elena's personal belongings while I was away from the palace. This wasn't a disagreement about household management. It was a deliberate breach of boundaries that you yourself helped establish." King Charles leaned back in his chair, his weathered hands folded carefully on his desk. "Catherine tells me she was trying to help you move forward from your grief. She's concerned that maintaining Elena's rooms exactly as they were is preventing you from healing properly." "And what do you think, Father?" William asked pointedly. "Do you believe that preserving the memory of someone we loved is preventing healing, or enabling it?" The question struck closer to home than William might have intended. King Charles still maintained a small shrine to his first wife in his private study, a photograph and a few personal items that Catherine had learned not to comment upon. The parallel wasn't lost on either man. There's a difference between remembering someone and refusing to move forward with your own life, the king replied carefully. Catherine isn't trying to erase Elena's memory. She's trying to help you engage with the present and the future. William leaned forward in his chair, his voice becoming more intense. "Father, Elena died 2 years ago in a car accident that nobody saw coming. 2 years is not a lifetime of grieving. It's barely the beginning of learning to live without someone you plan to spend forever with. If Catherine thinks that timeline is too long, perhaps she should examine her own motivations rather than my healing process." The implicit criticism of Catherine's rapid entry into the royal family hung in the air between them. King Charles's jaw tightened slightly, recognizing the challenge to his own choices embedded in William's words. King Charles studied his son's face for a long moment, seeing echoes of his own younger self in William's defiant expression. The conversation had moved beyond the morning's incident into deeper waters, questions about grief, loyalty, and the delicate balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. "Your stepmother has been part of this family for 5 years now," the king said slowly. "She's earned the right to have her concerns heard and respected, even if you disagree with her methods. Has she?" William's question was sharp. "Father, Catherine arrived at court functions with you less than 6 months after Elena's funeral. The staff noticed. The press noticed. The only person who seemed oblivious to how that looked was you." King Charles's face darkened at the criticism, but William pressed on. "Elena's death devastated our entire family, but particularly you. You loved her like a daughter, and she brought light into this palace that had been missing since Mother died." Catherine recognized that vulnerability and moved quickly to fill the void. "That's enough, William," the king warned, but his son continued. "Elena used to worry about this, you know. She told me once that she feared what would happen to you if something ever happened to her. She said you had a tendency to seek comfort in new relationships rather than processing grief properly. She was concerned that someone might take advantage of that pattern." The words hit King Charles like a physical blow. Elena had indeed expressed such concerns, usually late at night when they would walk through the palace gardens and discuss family matters. Her insight into human nature had been one of her most remarkable qualities, and her ability to see potential problems before they materialized had often helped the family avoid scandals and mistakes. "Elena was a wise woman," the king admitted quietly, "but she was also sometimes overly protective of those she loved. Catherine has been nothing but supportive of me and this family. Supportive of you, perhaps," William conceded, "but her relationship with the rest of the family has been strategic at best. She's polite to me in public and undermining in private. Today's incident wasn't the first time she's overstepped boundaries. It's simply the first time she was caught in the act." King Charles rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the crown more heavily than usual. "What exactly are you suggesting, William? That I dissolve my marriage because you and Catherine can't get along? I'm suggesting that Catherine needs to understand her place in this family hierarchy. She may be your wife, but she is not Elena's replacement, and she has no authority over Elena's memory or the spaces dedicated to preserving it." The king rose from his chair and moved to the window overlooking the palace gardens. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast golden light on the rose garden that Elena had redesigned during her years as a working royal. The sight of those carefully tended flowers served as a reminder of Elena's lasting impact on the family and the institution. "Catherine came to me after your confrontation," the king said without turning around. "She was shaken, William. Not just by your anger, but by the realization that she may have misunderstood the situation entirely." William remained seated, but his posture became more alert. "What did she say?" "She said that when she entered Elena's chambers this morning, she was thinking about you as her stepson, someone she wanted to help heal from grief. But after your reaction, she began to understand that those rooms aren't just about Elena. They're about your relationship with Elena and her significance to our entire family." This admission surprised William. He had expected Catherine to double down on her position, perhaps even to demand that he apologize for his outburst. "That's unexpected." King Charles turned back to face his son. "Catherine may be many things, William, but she's not stupid. She recognizes when she's made a serious error in judgment. The question is whether you're willing to accept that her intentions, however misguided, came from a place of genuine concern for your well-being." William considered this carefully. His anger toward Catherine ran deeper than this morning's incident. It encompassed years of feeling that she had inserted herself into family dynamics without earning her place or understanding the relationships that predated her arrival. But his father's words suggested that perhaps Catherine was beginning to grasp the complexity of her position. "What does she propose to do about it?" William asked. "She's requested a private meeting with you tomorrow morning. She wants to apologize formally and to discuss establishing clear boundaries going forward. She also suggested that perhaps she should have consulted with you before making any changes to Elena's spaces, rather than assuming she knew what was best." The proposal intrigued William, though he remained cautious. "And what do you think about this request?" King Charles returned to his desk but remained standing. "I think that family harmony is essential to the stability of the monarchy. Personal grudges and unresolved conflicts have a way of becoming public knowledge, and that serves no one's interests. If Catherine is willing to acknowledge her mistakes and work toward a better relationship with you, I believe you should give her that opportunity." William stood up slowly, his mind working through the implications. "On one condition," he said firmly. "Elena's chambers remain exactly as they are for as long as I deem appropriate. Catherine's opinions about my grieving process or the timeline for my healing are not relevant to that decision." "Agreed," the king nodded. "Those rooms were set aside specifically to honor Elena's memory, and that purpose will be respected. And Catherine acknowledges that she has no authority over family heirlooms, personal spaces, or memorial arrangements that were established before her marriage to you." The king hesitated slightly at this more sweeping limitation, but ultimately nodded. "She understands that there are aspects of family history and tradition that she must approach with greater sensitivity." William moved toward the door, then paused. "Father, I want you to know that my anger this morning wasn't really about the betting. It was about feeling like Elena's importance to this family was being diminished or erased. Elena wasn't just my wife, she was a bridge between your generation and mine. Someone who understood both the weight of royal duty and the need for genuine human connection." King Charles's expression softened considerably. "Elena was indeed a remarkable woman, and her loss has been felt by all of us. Perhaps we've all struggled to find the right way to honor her memory while moving forward with our lives." As William left his father's study, he felt a complex mixture of emotions. The confrontation with Catherine had been inevitable, and perhaps even necessary, but the aftermath suggested that real change might be possible. Whether Catherine's apparent willingness to acknowledge her mistakes would translate into lasting behavioral change remained to be seen. That evening, William returned to Elena's chambers for the first time since the morning's confrontation. The room felt different now, not violated as he had feared, but somehow more precious for having been defended. He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over the lavender silk sheets that had sparked such conflict, and whispered a quiet promise to Elena's memory that her significance to his life and their family would never be compromised again. The next morning arrived with unusual quiet in the palace corridors. Word of the previous day's confrontation had reached every member of the household staff, and there was a palpable sense of anticipation about the outcome of Catherine's requested meeting with Prince William. The appointment had been scheduled for 10 a.m. in the small drawing room adjacent to Elena's chambers, a location choice that carried its own symbolic weight. William arrived precisely on time to find Catherine already waiting, seated rigidly on one of the antique settees. She had chosen her outfit carefully. A modest navy dress with minimal jewelry, projecting an image of humility and respect rather than the regal authority she typically favored. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her usually perfect composure showed subtle signs of nervousness. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Catherine began as William took a seat across from her. "I owe you a formal apology for my actions yesterday, and more importantly, for my failure to understand the significance of Elena's chambers to you and to this family." William studied her carefully, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus calculated performance. "I'm listening." Catherine drew a deep breath before continuing. "When I entered Elena's rooms yesterday, I truly believed I was helping you move forward from grief that seemed to be consuming you. I see now that I was projecting my own discomfort with preserved spaces onto a situation I didn't fully understand." "Your own discomfort?" William questioned. "Yes," Catherine nodded, her voice becoming more honest and vulnerable. "I struggle with reminders of the past because they make me feel like an outsider in this family. Elena's presence is so deeply woven into the fabric of this palace that sometimes I feel like I'm competing with a ghost for relevance and acceptance." This admission surprised William with its candor. He had expected calculated apologies and strategic positioning, not a confession of personal insecurity. "Elena's memory isn't competition, Catherine. It's simply part of who we are as a family." "I understand that now," Catherine replied. "Elena wasn't just your wife. She was a daughter to your father, a friend to the staff, and a bridge between the royal family and the people we serve. Her chambers aren't just your private memorial. They're a testament to her impact on all of us." William leaned back in his chair, his defensive posture beginning to soften slightly. "When did you come to this understanding?" Catherine managed a small, self-deprecating smile. When your father showed me Elena's letter. What letter? Apparently, Elena wrote your father a letter shortly before her death, discussing her concerns about the family's future and her hopes for how we would all support each other if something happened to her. Your father has kept it private until now, but after yesterday's incident, he felt it was time I read it. William felt his breath catch. He had known that Elena and his father maintained a close correspondence, but the existence of such a letter was news to him. What did it say? Catherine reached into her purse and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Your father gave me permission to share it with you, if you want to read it. William took the letter with trembling hands. Elena's familiar handwriting filled 2 pages in her characteristic purple ink. As he read, his eyes began to well with tears. The letter was indeed prophetic. Elena had written about her concerns regarding the family's ability to cope with loss, her hopes that any future additions to the family would be embraced with patience and understanding, and her specific request that her personal spaces be preserved as long as William found comfort in them. But most remarkably, she had written about Catherine specifically. I hope that if something happens to me, the family will remember that anyone who brings happiness to Father deserves our gratitude, not our resentment. Change is frightening, especially after loss, but isolating new family members serves no one's interests. I pray that William will find it in his heart to welcome Father's future happiness, even if it comes in forms he doesn't initially understand or appreciate. When William finished reading, he looked up to find Catherine watching him with tears in her own eyes. She was worried about you feeling displaced by any future changes in the family structure, he said quietly. Yes, Catherine nodded. And she was worried about you isolating yourself in grief rather than building connections with new family members who genuinely care about your well-being. William carefully refolded the letter, his understanding of the previous day's events shifting dramatically. Elena always could see around corners that the rest of us couldn't navigate. She loved this family deeply, and she wanted all of us to find ways to love each other despite our different backgrounds and perspectives. Reading her words made me realize that my attempt to change her chambers wasn't just disrespectful to her memory. It was the opposite of what she would have wanted for any of us. Catherine stood up slowly and moved to the window overlooking the palace gardens. I need you to know that I don't want to replace Elena or diminish her significance to this family. I want to find my own place here without erasing the beautiful legacy she left behind. William joined her at the window, both of them looking out at Elena's rose garden, now in full bloom despite the approaching autumn. What do you propose we do differently going forward? I propose that we establish clear boundaries and expectations, but more importantly, that we find ways to honor Elena's wishes for family harmony. She wanted us to be allies, not adversaries. William nodded slowly, feeling the anger and resentment that had built up over 5 years beginning to shift into something more manageable. Elena's chambers remain exactly as they are for as long as I need them to be. Absolutely, Catherine agreed immediately. And I would like to learn more about Elena's charitable work and see if there are ways I might continue supporting the causes that were important to her. This suggestion surprised William more than anything Catherine had said. He would want to do that? Elena's letter mentioned several specific charities that she hoped would continue receiving royal patronage after her death. I'd like to research those organizations and see how I might contribute to their work, if that would be appropriate. William felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in Catherine's presence before. I think Elena would like that very much, and I think I would like it too. As they stood together at the window, both of them contemplating the garden that Elena had loved, William realized that his wife had orchestrated one final act of healing from beyond the grave. The letter had given Catherine the insight she needed to understand her place in the family, while giving William the reassurance that Elena had indeed wanted him to find ways to build relationships with new family members. There's something else, Catherine said softly. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about the timeline for grief being my business. You were absolutely right, and I want to apologize for suggesting that 2 years was too long to actively mourn someone you loved deeply. William turned to look at her directly. Thank you for saying that. Elena was my partner in every sense of the word, and losing her felt like losing half of myself. I'm still figuring out how to be whole again without her. Take all the time you need, Catherine replied, and know that when you're ready for whatever comes next in your life, you'll have my full support rather than my interference. As their meeting concluded, both William and Catherine felt that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The crisis that had erupted over Elena's bedding had forced them to confront deeper issues about family dynamics, respect for the past, and the possibility of building a more harmonious future. In the days that followed, Catherine began quietly researching Elena's charitable work, while William found himself more willing to engage in family gatherings and conversations that included his stepmother. The palace staff noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. The tension that had characterized interactions between the prince and his stepmother for 5 years had been replaced by a cautious but genuine respect. Elena's chambers remained exactly as they were, but they no longer felt like a battleground between past and present. Instead, they became what Elena had always intended them to be, a peaceful sanctuary, where love and memory could coexist with the ongoing work of building a family capable of weathering any storm that might come their way.